Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out on your beloved Sunday afternoon. My name is Daniela Zaltzman. I am a documentary photographer based in Paris and New York, and I'm also the founder and executive director of Women Photograph, which is a nonprofit that began in 2017 as a way to address and provide resources to address the imbalance of women in the news photography industry. When we launched, we had about 500 independent women, trans, and non-binary members based in roughly 80 countries around the world, and as of last week, I believe we now have 990 independent women, trans, and non-binary photographers based in 110 countries. So any photo editors out there, the resources exist. And in addition to that, our programming also includes an annual grant. We've dispersed about $120,000 worth of funding in the past 3 years to provide project grants to photographers. We have an annual workshop that for its first 2 years of existence was created and produced in partnership with Photoville here, and this year we'll take to Ecuador for the first time. We also have a travel fund. We have a data collection team that gathers information, reporting on how the industry hires and publishes photographers based on gender. And we also have an annual mentorship program that we are actually going to announce in just a couple weeks. So please feel free to check us out at womenphotograph.com and Women Photograph on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And now I am thrilled to introduce this amazing group of creative visual journalists who are going to share a little bit about their work and their practices. I think when it comes to all of the different ways we talk about how photography is evolving as a craft and as a discipline right now, identity is a huge part of it, and that's one of the reasons why Women Photograph exists. But in terms of our practice itself, we are also having huge conversations about what it means for us to be photographers, what it means for us to come into communities, especially when they are not our own, and how that impacts the stories we tell and the work that we bring to the rest of the world. So today, I thought it would be really important and powerful to have a conversation with these 5 photographers who all have practices that are deeply rooted in collaboration, whether that's collaborating with other visual journalists, that's collaborating with multimedia artists, collaborating with the people they're photographing, collaborating with broader communities. And so I'm going to ask all of them to introduce themselves and their work, and then we'll get into a little group conversation and open up the floor to audience questions. So first, I'd like to introduce Karen Miranda Rivadeneira.
Hello. Sorry, I should have prepared that. So the work that we're going to see today, it's called In the Mouth of the Mountain Jaguar. Everybody's a dancing hummingbird. That's my name. This project, I created it in Ecuador well, the timeline is a little bit confusing. Unofficially, I've been going to this region in the Andean Mountains for about 15 years, since my mid-20s. And then a few years ago, I decided how can I incorporate conversations that are rooted and based on the local people. So because I was doing a lot of, I'm sorry, let me just tell you about this photograph. This is the inspiration of the actual title of the project. And I do a lot of slow photography. I use large format, black and white. I shoot on paper. So I tend to do a lot of landscapes. And a lot of the times it just stay with me. And then because of my training in documentary photography, it's always inspiring and interesting to photograph people and what they do and how they engage in their environment. So I did a lot of festivities and sometimes portraits, but mainly just people in their everyday lives. Then this is like my own private things where when a photograph doesn't work for me, I think about how do we recycle photography and how do we use the things that maybe a set B image that we don't necessarily want to include in our final presentation. So I play with them. So I cut them and collage them. But really, the moment where collaboration began was in this photograph here. This woman here, her name is Matilde, and she's been my collaborator for over a decade. Before I did Mountain Jaguar, I did this project called Piedra Redonda, and it's all about documenting her life. And she's a medicine woman from the Huaranca lineage. And when I was with her, I mean, we spent so much time together, so much intimacy together. And this is on a Thursday. She takes baths. And I was with her, and I was with my big camera. And I'm just sitting. And then she said to me, how about if you take a picture of me? And of course, I was so, so delighted. And we did the photo, and then I did a little video because I just couldn't believe it. And I was just like, oh, well, we don't know how many times she's going to say this. You know, she's going to agree to this. And it was after that, it was like an organic movement of photographing her and then people in the community. So it was with her, her granddaughter, and other members of the community knew that I was photographing and making portraits. So they asked me if I could do something with them. And then together we chose locations, and then pretty much that's how it was with these images. So everything that is in black and white, the way that in my mind I differentiate between the images that are purely documentary is that they're in color, and then the ones that are more collaboration that are in black and white. That's kind of like my way of trying to make a distinction. But then it did not really last, because then this happened. And this is an image, again, with Matilde, Mama Matilde. We were talking about marriage, and she's around 85. And then we were just talking about what would it be if she wanted to get married again. And she said, I would only get married with a spirit being. So I said and then she told me she would do it in the Chimborazo volcano, which is here. So I said to her, how about if we do that? And then she agreed. So the man right here posing as the witness is someone that she chose, and someone from the military. And in her mind, the military is meant to protect us. So that was her decision. So she put that person there. And then the man asking for her hand is actually one of her students. Yes, so that's how this image happened. And then I have other images documenting this fictional marriage. And then there's this whole idea of what is fact and what is fiction, right? So fact very much exists within our reality, and it's also something that we can imagine. And in the same way, fiction, this can be very much a fictional image, but in another way, it's also a factual image. So there's that conversation that goes back and forth. And then this one was another one. This one was actually with the owner of this place. I come and have coffee here all the time, or whenever I can. And the place is called Seven Saints and Seven Devils. So the owner of the place said to me, you know, I have a lot of masks, and it would be nice to have a photograph with all the masks and being animated. And then I said, of course, let's make that happen. So all these people just heard about the idea, and then they decided to come. And pretty much what I asked them to do, because there's also that ideas around direction, right? And like where do people stand and what's going to be better for a photograph and the angle. And I tried to keep that as much as possible very fluid. So what I said to them, how about if you just talk to the people that you're attracted in their masks? So that's very much what happened. And I don't know if you noticed the lady on the izquierda derecha, on the right, that's Mama Matilde. So she actually came with me because we were gonna do another photo shoot. But then we were just sitting there, and she's just reading, and she doesn't know how to read, so she's just looking at the images. But her there is, to me, what grounds the image, because from her, then I just put the chairs and the tables, and then everyone was just getting together with the person that they were attracted to in their masks. And then the woman in the middle, with a very, very long mask, she arrived at the end. And so there's also this sense for me of how the magic of photography happens, and how just like it just happens. So this person actually came to see Mama Matilda because she was gonna get a limpia, that's a spiritual cleansing. And I said to her, you know, we're just doing this photograph. It's going to take us 15 minutes because that's the other thing. Everything has to be really fast. People don't have time to do hours of photography. It's like within 5-10 minutes, it's done. And she said, I'll sit here. And then I asked her, would you mind getting a mask? And she grabs that gigantic mask. And I thought, wow, that's just perfect. So after that, and this is after I come to New York, and I'm looking at all my photographs, and I noticed that I have a lot of these beautiful landscapes, and somehow I felt that within the body of work that I was creating around working in this community, the landscapes had a lot of meaning for me, and a lot of story for me and the community, but not really for you. So I thought, how can I integrate this idea of storytelling, which is something, let me know if I'm talking too much, okay. How can I integrate this idea of storytelling, which it's also part of what I do, into these landscapes? How can I animate them? And I thought of this painter that I like very much that is from a region right next to where all these photos are happening. And I went to him and I told him about the idea. And I said to him, you know, Julio, you are a storyteller. I'm a storyteller. Let's put our stories together. And I'll give you the landscape, which you know, and you just do whatever you want to do on top. That was very difficult for him to understand. He did not know why I wanted to ruin a perfectly nice landscape photograph. And after a lot of trial and errors, he just agreed. And he gave me like 2 months to, well, he says that he was going to take 2 months to do all this, all these paintings. And I gave him free will. He just did whatever he wanted to do. And this is the work that originated from that. So I brought 6, and the 6 images, I don't know if we have, oh no, that's it. And yes, so these are all his inventions of what happens. So then he explained to me, okay, this is springtime. Everyone is trying to pair and create. And then this one, which is very special. This is an offering to a goddess, or to Alpamama, Pachamama, as many know. And this is the project. Thank you.
Hello. Is it the left one? So I'm Hannah. I grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado, and this project is called City of Brotherly Love. It's in Philadelphia. That's where I currently live. So Philadelphia was the first city that I've ever lived in, and actually the first moment in my life where I was told I was beautiful, which are the men on the street of Philadelphia. So it kind of threw me off guard. I was like, oh, all right, I'll take it, but I hated it. So, so yeah, I would get catcalled on the street, and well, first I would, when I'd wake up every morning, I'd decide if I wanted to take my camera with me, if I felt like talking to people, and then I would either leave it at home or take it with me. And then if someone catcalled me, then I would ask for their permission and make their photograph. And I photograph in conversation. I prefer strangers because there's always something more to learn about the person. And so we get to know each other and find out that we're kind of from different places and different people, and we just learn about each other's lives. So yeah, I would do no provoking, just my day-to-day errands, and I would make these photographs. These were made from 2009 to 2011, 12-ish, and then they got really popular in 2013. This project is called Semaphore. I just made it last summer, 2018. And along the name with the word semaphore, it's signaling, pretty much spelling out your identity to strangers. So the whiteness, the theme of white in these photographs is the white signal, because for ships and boats you have two flags, and you have certain signals of the alphabet to spell, and so you can communicate to ships. So in this work, this is communicating your own identity beyond the surface. So it's like trying to make a comment on that fact. And this is Inez. This is called Inez Fixated. So this is like inspired by advertising, the ideal of beauty that the trope of that females fall into. So I had this image in mind, not specifically, but I wanted an attractive young female posing on the beach, and I made a Craigslist ad, and I told her exactly what I was looking for. And luckily, she was going to film school in California, so she was all about it. And originally, I wanted to have her vomit, but but that just there's too many. It could fall on, people could think she's bulimic. So I went with the demented, possessed route. And this is also Inez before she's completely fixated on the idea of beauty and what beauty really means. And this is just kind of like I don't think advertising would ever, well, maybe they do make this shot, but straight up the nose. I just wanted to get straight up the nose. And this is Jamal. He's just on the street in Philadelphia. He did not catcall me. I stopped him, and and I just wanted his height, his build, and just the softness of of his nipples, and he was just a really soft person. And then he has a bruise on his head, just all these things on the surface that could give you preconceived conceptions of someone before you start talking to them. This is Jing. I work at the Community College of Philadelphia, and she was a student there. And this, I found the spot first for the lighting, and then I knew I wanted to photograph someone there. And then she came along, and she was all about it. And she's playing with her ring. She was just proposed to, but she hadn't answered yet. So she's in her own head. I had nothing to do with it besides position her. It's just very beautiful. This is, oh crap, now I'm forgetting their names. I found these people on Craigslist also. I initially wanted to do the same thing in the bathing suit on the beach. But when she told me that she was trying to get her son into modeling and performing and stuff like that, I was like, oh, well, maybe we can include your son. And then I also did headshots for him. And she's kind of into witchcraft, which is kind of along the themes of the darkness that I typically fall into. And this is all I did with this is position them, and they kind of just fell into their poses. I always tell people where to put their shoulders, and just for the lighting purposes, and then they kind of fall into their own. So I think his name is Zach. Anyway, so he's watching soccer, and he just naturally I don't know what was going through his head, what he saw while they were playing. And maybe she's just trying to keep him there. And so this is completely natural. This is my sister, Sarah. So this project is also about judgment, and just trying to get people to ask what's the most important, what's the only thing that matters to them. And it tends to be family and friends, and love. this was inspired because just my sisters just had a really hard time in Fort Collins, very secluded. We're kind of one of 5 Black people in where we grew up. I mean, it's different now. That was 15, 20 years ago and beyond. But yeah, just a lot of judgment. My dad gave her a hard time about her feet because she had diabetes. And she still kind of doesn't take care of herself. But yeah, so this is just along the lines of like what really matters to you before you die in life and with people. 5 minutes. This is Simon. Simon is in the middle of transition in this photograph. The print is very huge. It's like I think 30 by 40, and you can see hair on the legs, just a little bit more detail about Simon. I think that's it, and that's my time.
Hello, I'm Gabriella Demczuk. So the first project I'm going to start on is a project I worked on for Topic magazine. They were working on a project commissioning 50 artists across the country to look at works made under the New Deal and looking at the projects and using that as influence, as inspiration for work looking at America today. And so I've been living in DC for about 10 years now. And I really wanted to kind of look at the community around me. Just within the past 10 years, I've seen so much transition, not just in the landscape, but also the demographics of the city. And so I started to look at the Farm Security Administration and the photographs that they had created. And so as I was looking at it, I started noticing these images of alley dwellings around the city. And I started looking into the history of alley dwellings, and they were these shacks that were created in the backs of, in the alleys of very wealthy white homeowners. And the majority of the people living within these alley dwellings were African Americans. And so as I started looking at kind of the history, it led me down this long rabbit hole to kind of see how both the federal government and local government and even the private sector started all working together to start eliminating these alley dwellings and pushing people out. And what I found was that in the southwest area of Washington, back in between the 60s, or the 50s really, all the way through the 70s, you had this time of urban renewal. And so the urban renewal movement was actually, Southwest DC was the prototype for the urban renewal movement. And it set national housing standards and policies across the country. And so Southwest DC, about 99% of buildings were raised on 560 acres of land, displacing about 23,000 residents and 1,500 businesses. And it was also the area where we had eminent domain. So the Berman versus Parker case came out of Southwest DC and set the standard for eminent domain for for federal government. And so I then started looking at Southwest DC today and what was happening in the community. And I found that there were a lot of similarities with the policies that were being implemented, the construction, and just how they started to push out people who have been living there for decades and who were really rooted in the community. And so I really wanted to kind of, in this project, show the relationship, the history of the history of the area, and looking at what is happening today. And then in this project, this was on a town called Unionville on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. This was started in 2015 when I was working in Baltimore, I was covering the uprising in Baltimore, and I found that a lot of the stories that we were working on really looked at sort of the negative aspects of these communities, and it was kind of the same with these national stories happening around the country. And I wanted to work on a project that really celebrated Black life. And so my uncle, he is a historian in African American studies, and he was doing his dissertation on this town on the Eastern Shore. And this town was founded by 18 veterans of the US colored troops who came back from the Civil War as freedmen and released land from a Quaker farmer. And after 30 years, they were able to buy back the land and create their own town. And so a lot of the descendants still live in Unionville. And there is a church there that is kind of the center of this town. A lot of the founders, all the founders are buried behind the church. And what's also fascinating is that this land and these former slaves were actually slaves on the same plantation as Frederick Douglass. And so they're all friends with him, they all knew him. And then the county over is where Harriet Tubman came from. And so there's a lot of history within this whole area. And so the images I created using an etching process, intaglio printing, because I wanted to show the history of the images, and I found that the aesthetic evoked that history. And it was also a way to create mass images during that time. And so printmaking was really used as a tool to get out images. And then it was also really important for me to show the actual documents, showing the sale of these people, because I find that sometimes it can be difficult to understand what it has happened so long ago. And so seeing these documents really sort of create this, it makes it more real. And so we have the slave sales, and then we also have sort of the record of the lease as well. And so the Quaker farmer was very good about just documenting kind of keeping a sale record, a lease record of every month, all the people within the town who would come in and pay their rent every month. And what was really fascinating to see about, or looking through these records, is seeing how they would work together to make sure that they were able to pay their rent on time every month. And so you'd see someone might be behind a little bit, and so their neighbor would help them. And so you really start to understand through these documents just how closely everyone worked together to really make sure that by the end of these 30 years that this was theirs. And then being in DC, I also cover a lot of politics. I cover Capitol politics, White House, and then national politics as well. And so this was a project that Vox had approached me for, to go with a article that Ezra Klein was working on impeachment. And so they sent me some illustrations that another artist had made for the project, or for the article. And looking at these illustrations, I wanted to sort of mimic the aesthetics of it, so that there was kind of a more continuity within the images. And so these were gum transfer prints that I created with archival images that I had made of the Trump administration. And that's it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmin Chang. I'm excited to be up here because actually, also at United Photo Industries, I get to wear the hat of Associate Director working on our projects around education and community. And so it's like so lovely to be hearing about all these projects. And yeah, this is my favorite part about what photography can do. So really excited to be up here with you all. So I'm going to share about 2 projects that I've been working on. The first project is one called Community Heroes. This is a project that started 4 years ago, just as a really small neighborhood project. I live in Fort Greene, just down the way. I've lived in Fort Greene for 8 years, and a friend of mine's a community organizer. He was helping this woman throw a Memorial Day festival in Fort Greene Park. She's been doing this festival for 26 years. Miss Amu is like amazing. She just kind of brings her own resources, and kind of along the years, various people come along the way and help her. This year, my friend Zach was helping her with getting some food donations from the local supermarket for hot dogs and burgers and things like that. And they started talking, and Miss Amu really wanted to do some sort of artwork as part of the festival. And so Zach, he and I saw each other, and he was like, hey, I just want to put like a pin in your head. I know you've wanted to like do something in your neighborhood. This is happening in a month. Do you want to just like plant a seed and see if you can like think of some sort of art project to do? And I think like they were thinking more along the lines of like, oh, maybe Jasmine can paint a banner or like do like a face painting station, which I could be fun, and we did that. But I sat with Miss Amu, and we kind of talked about like what she wanted to do, and her whole festival, her whole like Memorial Day party was all about celebrating peacemakers in the community. And so I was like, oh, well, let's like do that with the art project. And so we came up with an idea of having her just tell us like who some of the peacemakers were. We worked with like a local community center, and just kind of through word of mouth, like polled people for 6 what we called community heroes, because we wanted to just kind of nudge the word hero and change the fact that a hero didn't have to be a really important public person, but it could be like an everyday neighbor who was a peacemaker in their neighborhood. So we came up with that idea, and because of my work with United Photo Industries, it's like, well, I definitely know how to print photography really big, and we can hang it up in the park. So let's invite like local photographers. We can reach out, we can find photographers in the neighborhood, and let's invite photographers to come in and take these portraits, and we'll print them up as banners to put in the park. I think the exciting thing about inviting lots of photographers in was just thinking about, Brooklyn neighborhoods are changing. There's lots of historic residents, there's lots of new residents moving in, and kind of building a project where we're inviting people together is like, this could be a way of just forming relationships, introducing someone to this community center, things like that. So we did that. Let's see what I did next. We did that. The first event, we had 6 heroes, and it just worked really well. It got photographers were really excited to do something in their neighborhood. When we actually had Peace Fest, the photographers all came out. They brought their friends. The heroes came out. They brought their families. It was just like, it was a really lovely community event, and it got people stopping to kind of like ask and talk, and so we're like, okay, we should continue doing this. So over the last few years, Zach, who's my collaborator on this project, does a lot of community work in Gowanus. So we've done a couple iterations of this project with the Gowanus houses for their Old Timers Day. And then just last year, we'd been talking in conversation with the park about doing a more permanent exhibition. Until last year, it's only ever been up for like a day for a festival. So last year, it's wonderful working on something in your neighborhood because like you can walk out of your house to go to coffee and you run into the park director or you run into some of the artists that you're working with, and it's just like gets things moving a lot faster and a lot more organically. So we got permission to do this project in 2 parks in Fort Greene, and highlighted 40 heroes last year, and this was up for 11 months in Fort Greene Park and in Commodore Barry Park. So these are some of the heroes that we've highlighted over the last few years. Each one is taken by a different photographer. I know some of you, I think, are in the room. I think I saw Lauren and Jocelyn. Yeah, so as we kind of got to this point, we built out more of our process of doing this. So we start by, the most important part of this project is outreach. So getting the word out to the neighborhood about this is something that we're doing, like please like give us your nominations. Who are your community heroes? So we are at community meetings, we table at the library, different events, and yeah, collect nominations. And once the nominations come in, these are all, we then reach out to local artists and photographers to take their portrait. And so these are some of the photo shoots. And that's Jocelyn up there on the top right. So I wanted to share about a couple of instances in this project, thinking about collaboration, where collaboration and working with the community has changed the shape of this project. So like when it started, we were thinking like, okay, great. We're getting nominations for living heroes and we're pairing a photographer to take their portrait, and that's what'll go up. Really soon into doing this project, people started nominating. They're like, well, what if there's like this mother of the community who passed away 10 years ago, but she was hugely important to the community. Like, how can we tell her story? And so we got enough of those that we were like, we have to come up with something. And so we started, instead of doing a photograph, we reached out to artists who were archival storytellers or journalists or writers, and we got like friends and family together to do like an oral history session and put together a collage of their work. So this is for a community hero named Keisha Jackson Grant. And this is just all of her friends and family gathered around the table. This particular artist, Victoria is a multimedia artist, and so on top of doing the banner, she's like, I really want to put together an audio piece. Do you think they would mind? And so it's like, yeah, totally. I'll talk to them and let's put that together. I think it's really important that each artist that works with us brings in their practice and how they would tell the story. This is one of our latest ones, and it was a similar kind of like legacy archival story. But this one was really exciting because the artist, she was like, I have an exact idea of how I want to set it up, and we kind of did some sketches, and I'm excited to kind of see these heroes, or see these banners change shape. I'm gonna go. I guess I would say just the last thing about community heroes is the things that are most exciting are that it's a project that like many hands get to touch in many ways. So like for the neighborhood, it's like from everyone who's sent in a nomination to organizations that have let us table at their events to all the artists who have participated. I think having all of these different hands touch a project just like it builds it up, and it also makes it kind of a community project. It makes it something that like I think for all the artists, it's like once you've seen your work up in a local park, that space just means something different. And so yeah, that's one of my favorite parts about it. The second project that I'm going to talk about, this is a new project. This is the first time that I'm sharing about it. This is a project down in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And this is a project that's a collaboration with an amazing photographer named Keisha Bari. Okay, be super fast. So it's a similar project, and it's a similar project, but we were commissioned to do this down in a place that was, we're both New York photographers, and this is down in North Carolina. So it, I think, just really challenged us to think about how to set up processes and structures where we're really working with the community, because it's a place that is new to us. So yeah, I'll just go through these. And yeah, I think that's my last one.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Cinthya Santos. I am from Mexico, based in New York since 7 years ago. And I'm going to start showing you the last project that I have been working for around 2 years. It's about migrants and family who have been refugees in many churches and temples across the United States. And in the beginning, this project started just taking them photos, but for recommendation of one of my friends who is editor, he said like, you are repeating all the scenes all the time, you have to make something different. And I start to asking the children and the people living in these churches to write their own thoughts and drawing their own experience. This is Roberto Baez. He's the son of one of the more well-known activists and co-founder of New Century Coalition in Colorado, in Denver. And this is Sujigno Sahuti. He is from Indonesia, but he lived in a church in Meriden, Connecticut for 2 years. And I asked him to draw himself, but I didn't, I put the photos and the drawing together and match a lot. But we didn't know each other. And I spent a lot of time with him and his wife. And for me also was this question about who owns the stories, who owns the narrative. And in my work, I started 3 years ago working as a photographer. My background is in ethnohistory and anthropology. So for me, it's like all the time to discuss the idea and confront the idea that these people are not our subjects, are people who collaborate with us. Because without them, we don't have a project, we don't have a publication, we don't have a grant. So give them agency to the people is really important. And with this project specifically living in Santori, I just start to dig in more and try to put my skills as an historian, also working with archives from the 1980s about the Santori movement in that epoch. And with the children specifically, I was really interested in their thoughts and what was happening with them, working really close with one of the families here in New York and with the children's. They were all the time really nervous about the media, because the media were all the time thinking that living in Santori was a reality show. And for me it was really important to portray them with dignity also. This project we make in collaboration, he loves the football. And I asked him if he can draw and write their thoughts about what does it mean Santori for him. And the next project that I am going to show you is my first project as a photographer. I have been working also as a community organizer in New York City, so that made me the possibility to know more my community in New York City. And also I used to live in a church. My husband is a minister, so and works a lot with immigration. So also figured out between the intersection to be an artist and activist. So I know a lot of abuelitas, grandmother, and I start photographing them, and also with the idea to break the stereotype about Mexican women of color, working class women who work as a nannies or so working class, that break the idea of the stereotype. So I started working with friends like Eugenia and going to their homes and photographing them. The question of this project was how do you like to be represented in this project? In this photo, imagine that this photo is going to be shown in a gallery or published in a newspaper, who you are. And also combine the environment in their homes. Is looks like it's settled, but it's not. Maybe they clean their home that day, but everything is like this. The color of their walls, and they have a sense of fashion. So I started the project with this abuelita, with Gisela Bravo. Basically, she called me one day. He says, Cynthia, I need a photo for my grandchildren that are in Mexico and they don't know me. Can you take me a photo? And when I came, she was like this. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. Yes, and she's a healer and really well known in the underground Mexican network in Sunset Park. So yeah, and I really like the giraffes. And the people is like, did you tell her? And I was, no, she made everything. I just was like, she used me as a vehicle. So, this is Dionisia Martinez. And I met her in a karaoke, and I used to live in Sunset Park, so she sells candies in the streets, and she's part of also a documentary of one of my friends. So also I asked her the same question, and that day we were in their home. In the project, if you go to my webpage, you are going to see a lot of photos in the beds. It's because, you know, the New Yorkers know that the spaces are so small. So sometimes we just have a room that is our space. So I remember that she said, like, Cynthia, the people can see my underwears. Because I gave them photos, and she was like showing to all the people in the neighborhood, in the grocery, oh, my photo in the magazine, you know? But at the end she said, how was my idea? Because she's like atrevida, like, I don't know how to say in English. So, and the next project is about spaces of detention that I am still working on. During this administration, it has been really hard, as you know, for the family separation issue. So I have been like, through the word of my husband, we have been like give them hospitality to a lot of families they need to come to New York to reunify with their children, because a lot of these organizations who works with ICE, like Abode House, that are shelters for no-minor accompanied minors, are in the Bronx, some of them, and like Abode House or Cayuga. So this family came, Daisy, to reunify with their children. And we help them to, after 3 months, to be separated. And I asked the children to draw their experience, and the photos are from our trip to the liver statue. And they also grew up their experience being separated in the border. And this is Janet Vizguerra. She was in Santori, and she came back. She's an activist, and when I was in Colorado documenting living in Santori, basically she brought me to this idea of detention center, and the people is speaking more and more about these places, and I started this project about how the infrastructure and architecture of detention center shape the well-being, the social interaction, and mental health of migrants. So it's a collaborative project that also the people is writing their experience, drawing their experience, and I am going to take photos of New Jersey are 4 jails that works as a detention center. So the idea is also to reimagine these spaces. Maybe we cannot change like policies, but we can reimagine the spaces and the condition inside of these spaces. So this was a commission that I made for Topic, but was not public because they closed. And it was the same idea that you have to see back in times in the archives photos and choose a photo and redo it nowadays, and was about the street vendors in New York City. And I have a lot of friends who work as street vendors, and they are trying to unionize it? Yeah, make a union. So I just take a photo of them with Polaroid, and they grow. I ask them about if they can write something about their struggles being in the streets, you know, the harassment of the police, the sanitation, and also like when you are undocumented is another level of harassment. So this is Maria, who sells like dolls to cover the paper, towel paper. It's a tradition in Mexico. I don't know if it's in other countries, but. And this is in the Bronx, and he sells like chicharrones, also like elotes, that is like corn. So this is, thank you.
Thank you. Can we give everyone a big round of applause? So I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we're going to open it up to the audience if you all have any questions. But so I think the most fascinating link between everything that you all discussed is all of you have referenced in some way some part of your practice that doesn't really align with what we traditionally consider editorial photography. Cinthya, you referenced directly being both an activist and an organizer and a photographer. A lot of you were talking about, you know, having this collaborative conversation with the people you photograph about how exactly the photo should play out. And maybe I'll throw this to Gabby first, since I think you work the most in pure editorial spaces. Do you think there is capacity for more collaboration within editorial photography? Do you think we are moving towards a space where that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, is this on? Oh. I think any time that you are photographing someone, photographing a community, there always has to be collaboration. Because you have to show up and speak with the person, speak with the community, talk about your intentions, because it is a collaboration. You never want to take from somebody. And so I think how we do that is starting to change. I think in the past, it was a lot of taking. And now we're talking more about the ethics around image making, talking about representation. Who is it that's going into these communities and photographing? And so I think that aspect of it is really changing. But there are some restrictions within editorial, within journalism, ethics that you have to kind of keep with. And so I think right now we're kind of at this point where we're questioning some of those ethics and some of those standards. Are those standards necessary anymore? And I personally want to keep having those conversations and to continue to really push those boundaries.
So I'm curious, maybe this is for Karen and Cinthya specifically. You know, Karen, you sort of took us through very logically the evolution of collaboration in your work, and I'm curious, was that for the sake of the talk, or is that really organically how it evolved within your work? Was this sort of a series of revelations that blossomed into this more and more collaborative work? Was it something that has always been deeply incorporated into your practice? How did that evolution happen for sort of both you and Cinthya?
I very much agree with what you said. I think that in every project that we do, there is a level of collaboration. And I think that in my practice, it has become really bold because it's just so embedded in really discussing a photograph with someone or having these interventions. But I do think that it has evolved, and the way that the presentation happened is very much the way it evolved for me. As I mentioned, the first project I did, Piedra Redonda, and where I'm documenting Mama Matilde, I spent so much time with her, so we got really comfortable. So it wasn't so much about asking her to do things or collaborating. She just felt really comfortable and doing whatever she wanted to do in front of me, in my presence. And from that, the whole aspect of, okay, let's just like really think about how do you want to be represented? Not just so much about being comfortable in my presence and allowing me to do what I want, but how do you want to be seen in the world, and where these photographs are going to go. So we had all these discussions, and I think that for a lot of the people that I have photographed, it's interesting for them, very similar to what Cinthya was saying. It's just like how they want to be seen in their communities, and this pride and happiness they have to being able to be photographed in the way that they want to be photographed. I mean, for Mama Matilda to be naked like that, it's extremely bold, but at the same time, it's her work as a healer is so much about stripping down a lot of the layers that we create. So for her, it's like the only way that I can really show myself is by being vulnerable. So that is a very active and conscious decision. And yeah, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that for me, I am really new in this discipline since 3 years ago, but I have been working in the issue in immigration since 2004 as an anthropologist. I did my dissertation of indigenous immigration in New York City. So living here with migrants who are indigenous and also in the village, and also coming from the perspective of anthropologists, is like, sometimes we are so colonialist and we want to take everything from them. And it's a part also ethical standard that we have in anthropology, as the same way that we have in journalism and photojournalism, I remember that one of my teachers told me one day, you are here to do research, not for help people. And that phrase give me, the sense of what I want to do with my work. And it's not just have a name or reputation, also give them back something, because we have been taking a lot of things from that, a lot of knowledge, wisdom. So for me, it's like give them agency to the people and acknowledge that all the information, all the time that they give us is so valuable. And yeah, I think that the collaboration started like years ago, but now it's in a different way because photography has more media outlets and more is more diverse than read an anthropological article. And yeah, everything that also Karen has been saying, like working as a community organizing give me another skill to understand what does it mean to be undocumented, what does it mean to be a person of a working class. Even though I am Mexican and woman of color, I have a lot of privilege. I didn't cross the border. I came with visa. So I am a green card holder. So all of these layers have been, also trying to understand how I'm going to represent my community and asking them all the time what they think about my projects with them.
For Hannah, so, I think when it comes to collaboration, we are sort of circumventing and maybe pushing back against a lot of historical standards and traditions within photojournalism, but it also introduces a new set of challenges for all of us to think about as photographers. And one of them, to me, is ownership. How do you think about ownership, especially for a project like City of Brotherly Love, where you are fundamentally asking these people to participate in, be complicit in this thing you're doing, but what is the follow-up conversation like? How do you think about ownership and the way in which the people you collaborate with have a role to play in your photography?
Yeah, I guess from our initial encounter, I wanted to be known as a photographer, not a nice piece of, a nice woman-looking person. But then, and then when we leave our encounter, they know me as a photographer. And then sometimes I would see them. We live in the same neighborhood. Sometimes I would see them all the time. So I forgot to mention the first photograph of Hassan, his girlfriend was sitting on his lap. So I ended up he was a musician, I ended up doing photographs for his album. But yeah, and then, so that project specifically was for me. It was kind of my personal, they were my images. I felt like my experience. What's the word I'm looking for? Kind of just a moment, timeline, diary of my life of discovering more about myself and other people. But I don't know, but copyright, that's for me. And then it did get really popular, and there's some people didn't ask permission to use the photographs, so that would have been appreciated, but it's fine.
And then before I open it up to the audience, maybe Jasmin, what is your ultimate goal in collaborating? You sort of touched on why you think it's important for everyone to have their hands in something and what that means for a community to see themselves reflected and see themselves also involved in the work itself. But what is sort of your fundamental goal with collaborative work?
I would say, I think that there's a lot of, I think of myself less of a photographer and a lot more as an organizer, and I think that there's just a lot of potential in collaborating through, let me back up. I think what we aim to do at Photoville is also, it's like through storytelling and kind of doing storytelling in collaboration, there's just like a really lovely way of like working together to make something bigger than yourself happen. And I think that's like the name of the title of this panel, Working Together. Like when you work on something together, like there's like a bond that's formed, and yeah, and a sense of community. And I feel like that's kind of the thing that I think drives me to do more work.
Thank you. I know I'm a little over time, but if we can, I'd love to just open it up to the audience for one or two quick questions. Yes.
Yes, I'm delighted that my daughter is in your age group because I've read your bios and it's just incredible to me that you all have these wonderful opportunities. I, as a senior photographer, have come from a background where I wasn't educated in photography. I've been shooting my whole life. After my children were grown, I came to a project that is extremely important to me, and it's rooted in personal trauma. It's a women's empowerment project. And I have done a fundraiser. I'm trying very hard to get it off the ground. But I would like to be able to collaborate with organizations that are there to help women help themselves. And I just need some ideas about how to get it off the ground. So if I could maybe talk to someone afterwards, or if someone has an idea at this point, I would love to hear it.
Sure, why don't you come talk to us afterwards?
Great.
Any other audience questions? Yes.
What about relationships and collaborating with other photographers who join projects? Does the panel have experience with that? How did that go? What did we learn and experiences shared for us to have better projects?
I think I feel like the key with collaborating with other artists and photographers is just like being really clear with each other. Like, what am I doing? What are you doing? What do you expect of me? What do I expect of you? And like, I want to say like, be clear about what we're making, but you can't really because it changes, especially when you're collaborating. And so just like continuing to communicate about that throughout the whole process.
I think one more question.
One left. Yes.
I know this is probably a common question, but I'm just curious, like in an age of social media and just pictures everywhere, disappearing pictures on Snapchat, I just wonder how you feel like you add specific significance to your pictures and how you want people to perceive them differently from the picture that they receive and disappears. Like as a photographer, I don't know, how does this journalism, how do you feel like you're communicating differently? I'm not sure exactly. I think you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's something that I've been thinking a lot about is kind of where our images go and what effect it has on people. And because of social media now, everything is so quick and there's so much visuals out there. So how do you really get the images across to people that need to be seeing this, or stories that need to be told or be understood? I think the mediums we use in which these images go through have specific kind of intentions. So like social media is very quick and rapid. And so that kind of serves that purpose. It's like if you want to get something out quickly, you put it on social media. But then if you want sort of longevity to the project, you have to start thinking outside of social media. It's like if I'm working in a certain community, then where can I place these images where this community will kind of benefit from it? Who can I collaborate with? Other organizations that can use the images to maybe help this community or help communities similar to it in other areas. So I think it's really sort of looking outside of the box, outside of the immediate publication and Instagram and Facebook, and really targeting specific areas and becoming much more niche in what we do. I think when we didn't have the internet and visuals weren't everywhere, publications kind of served that place where we can put our images and it would get kind of seen widely. But now everything is seen. So now it's really targeting and finding those smaller places in which it can like really benefit the community.
Well, thank you all so much for coming out and spending your Sunday afternoon with us. One more round of applause for our panelists.